All right. We are now live. Excellent. All right. Well, here we are, folks, once again for Saturday Sentiments. We dig deep to get to the good stuff. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you for being here. I'm starting up bright and early today because I've got a performance with Soul Expressions later on today down in North Carolina, so I need to head out to to make sure that I'm on time and everything. But I wanted to let you know a couple of things. Most notably, that I've been working on a book about gospel jazz, and that's what I want to talk about today. It's, my topic just says, just a little taste of the book, my book about gospel jazz. So I want to let you know what kinds of things we're talking about and, just give you a sense for what's happening with it. Also, I love my mugs. So I got my trusty Jazz in the Spirit mug. And if you like these, you can get one too. There's information on the post about how you can get the mugs and how you can get the t-shirts, and of course how you can get the album. So we hope that you all will like, follow, and subscribe, and click the notification bell for Jazz in the Spirit, so that you'll be able to hear and see what's going on. Let's see. Good morning. How are you doing? Let's see. What else did I want to tell you? Oh, well, this is a song that in the background I'm listening to my gospel jazz radio, and it's a song called "Down by the Riverside" by Mr. What's his name? Benny Green, wonderful piano player. So I always listen to gospel jazz radio. Mr. RichardDAbreuJr is the program director, so he puts on a really good program. So if you get a chance to check it out, jazzradionetwork.com, and specifically the channel Gospel Jazz Radio. He's got a few different ones that he uses. There's four actually. There's one that specializes in like a classical jazz fusion. There's one that's just a general jazz station. There's one that's called Jazz Vespers. And then there's this one, which is my favorite, the Gospel Jazz Radio. So check them out. Check them out. There's some good stuff on there. So we are going live on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, and Instagram all at the same time. So it's a lot of fun being able to be here with you all like this. So let me jump in. So the title of the book is just called Gospel Jazz, and it's by yours truly, RichardDAbreuJr. And my expectation is that it will be released to the public on Juneteenth 2021. I have last year, you all know, well, most of you know, I released my debut album, which was called Jazz in the Spirit, to the world on Juneteenth of 2020. And a lot of people ask me, why Juneteenth? It's because it's a very significant holiday to the history of the United States, but specifically and especially for African American people. It represents finally the fulfillment of a promise that was made 2 years earlier, but never delivered, i.e. the emancipation in 1863. But the people in Galveston, Texas did not hear about it until 2 years later. And so on that day, when I guess that's when the Union troops arrived in Galveston to deliver the news and to announce that everyone, was no longer enslaved, it was a day of great celebration. And so that's the history of Juneteenth, and why I chose Juneteenth is to celebrate that history, but also to, to commemorate a time. Like, I called my recording a release commemorating a release, because it took me 21 years of work to put that CD together, stopping and starting and stopping and starting, and sometimes wondering if I would ever finish. So, but when it finally was finished, it was also the fulfillment of a promise. So, so that's why I did it. And the day is one which, I'm not going to actually use that mic. It was a day that, I really, just had a lot of significance for me personally. And so I'm sticking with it. So the book is supposed to come out Juneteenth 2021, and I hope that y'all will support it. So I'm just going to give you a little taste of some of the things that are in there, and then I'll let you have your Saturday back. So just a little bit of the introduction, the opening words. Let me see. Oh, get my microphone straight. Okay, so here's, from the first chapter. Gospel jazz is the most commonly accepted name of an amalgam and assortment of music that has as its unifying theme the blending, organic fusing, and commingling of gospel and jazz styles, which are themselves far-reaching and diverse, into what has become an identifiable and vibrant hybrid style. It has long been a dream and vision of mine to codify, document, concretize, and most of all, celebrate this hybrid style for several reasons. One is to facilitate in-depth study in the halls of academia. Two is to bring together all the disparate elements into a central area so that all the participants and creators can see themselves and each other as part of the same thing, and hopefully facilitate further synergy and collaboration between the artist-creators that drive and propel the music forward. A third reason is to give those who desire to listen specifically to this style a central area of focus as an entree into this vast, diverse hybrid genre. Lastly, I hope to inspire current and future generations to go even further in their exploration, experimentation, and quest for excellence within this context, and connect the dots of history so we can see this not as a blip in time, but an inevitable evolution whose time has come and who deserves specific attention. So that's kind of my opening about this book, and I'm going to jump forward a little bit. So one of the things that I did to help to illustrate the story of gospel jazz is I took, I had created, and this was originally for my CD. I wanted to do this. I created a sampler of 48 songs, just little snippets, and they were arranged musically too. So it was basically a progression of the music, so you could see some of the major trends. Good morning again, Kim. Thanks for being here. It was a combination of history, arrangement, as well as, talking about the common ground that those different styles had. So we went all the way back to the early days, in the 1920s, all the way up to today, and we traced some of the major movements. Now, of course, it's impossible to have a truly comprehensive history, because it's vast. But I thought that the highlights would still help to illustrate the point. So that's what we did. Now, the problem was, of course, music industry being the music industry. Good morning, Professor. How are you, sir? Mr. Milton Marriott, distinguished musical director in the Virginia area. Good to see you, sir. There was a issue with the publishers. They didn't want to allow me to, use these the samples of these compositions. So I wasn't able to do it for my CD, but I could still describe them and the progression of the history in the book. So that's what I'm working on. And if they give me permission, maybe I could include the history sampler as part of the book, or as like a YouTube reference, that a YouTube link that people can check. Because I'm planning to do, the hard copy book, but also an ebook. And if I have time, I'll even try to do an audio book. A lot of people say they like to hear me speak, so so I'll do that. So that was some of the earlier part of the book. We listed people, some of whom you probably have heard of, like Louis Armstrong, Dizzy Gillespie, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, some of those folks. We also listed people like Thomas Dorsey on the gospel side. We also listened people like Roberta Martin. You may or may not have heard of her stage name was Blind Arizona Dreams, but she was one of the earliest gospel musicians to be recorded way back in the 20s. Of course, you may have heard of Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Mahalia Jackson. Later on, people like the Hawkins family, Richard Smallwood. Later, artists, choirs like Milton Brunson and Thompson Community Singers. And then later, groups like Take Six, Ben Tankard, Kirk Whalum. You may not, I don't know if you've heard of Jamar Jones, but he's a fantastic pianist and specializes in gospel jazz. Hi, Kelva. Good morning, sweetheart. So we trace music from what I would call, the origins up till now. And we describe each of those in terms of what we, thought that they contributed stylistically to this hybrid style that we now call gospel jazz. And then I also talk about some of the different names that gospel jazz has been called, because there are many of them. Then I talk about some of the stylistic elements that distinguish gospel jazz. And then I have some quotes from some people who are steeped in the music. So let me just give you a little taste of some more of this book. Let's see here. Okay, so for example, there is a song called "The Chant," which was written by, let me make sure I got this name right. It was a German composer named Mel Stitzel, but this particular recording was recorded by Ferdinand Joseph Lamoth, better known as Jelly Roll Morton, who was one of the legendary stride pianists from New Orleans, who, some disagreed with him, but he considered himself to be the father of jazz. If you listen to his music, there was a lot of amazing stuff that he did. So just talking about some of the things that he did now. There's a song, let me turn this down for a quick second. In the chant, there is and you can find this on YouTube, there's this figure that goes, so if you listen to the song, it uses that motif a lot. And what I noticed is, of course, this is something that somebody of my generation would think of. I heard that same figure, that dun, 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 dun. I heard that same figure in, of all things, the Jeffersons theme. And those of you that remember the Jeffersons may remember this breakdown section where it's like, beans don't burn in the kitchen, beans don't burn on the grill. What's happening is the bass drum is going boom, 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 boom. So it would take something like, a study of this kind of music to see where there is basically how history repeats itself. Because, here was Jelly Roll Morton writing this song or arranging this song for his band in 1926. And, the Jeffersons theme came around in the 1970s, but this is how music history repeats itself. And it's when we study, we learn things, and it gets really exciting when you find these little snippets. One of just a little bit of the discussion about that is, this is one of the things that I wrote about that song is, I chose this figure because it is a great example of musical hybridization. The song is a kind of musical crossroads. You can hear the boom chuck, the bass accent on strong beats 1 and 3, and chord accents on the weak beats 2 and 4, and stop time breaks of ragtime, the fire and soulful singing style of New Orleans early jazz ensembles, and a foretaste of the swinging big band era that came later with the swinging solely, long-form arrangement, and harmonic complexity. All of these are common characteristics of later gospel jazz. So that's, one of the things I was saying about that piece by Jelly Roll Morton. Good morning, how are you? Thanks for being here. Now, one of the things was really exciting about Miss Arizona Drains. First of all, some people may not have known, although that was like her stage name and her professional name. Her name actually was Juanita, and it actually it was more like Juanita Drain with no S, or possibly Drain or Durant, because where she was from in Texas, they had that kind of drawl. So the way you said it, drain, it could have been 2 syllables or 1. But she made, I'm going to go to a little section of my book here. She made 6 recordings in one day in Chicago that mixed the sacred and spiritual in ways that had never been done before. And this was a piece that I got from a guy named Michael Corcoran, a member of the Pentecostal Church of God in Christ who was classically trained. Ms. Drains was the first to bring hot piano, i.e. ragtime, barrel house, and boogie-woogie styles, to songs of praise. Among those who have acknowledged her influence was Reverend Thomas A. Dorsey, generally regarded as the father of gospel music. In this active piano style, Drains outlines the melody she sings while also playing a running counterline with accents on the upbeats and 8th notes before the 4th beat. She also throws in a fast arpeggio in the style of people like Art Tatum, later Oscar Peterson, Nat King Cole, Duke Ellington, some of these other folks with us at Flourish. Those of you that play piano, you know what I'm talking about. That little kind of flashy style. So she was doing that while she was singing. And there's the song that I listed was a song called Lily of the Valley, which you can check out. And she's like, he's the lily of the valley, yes, my Lord. He's white, the rose of Sharon. Of course, she's doing it in her range. But while she's doing that, the piano is going. So she's wailing away on the piano while she's singing this. One of the things about her is that she was basically the first gospel singer to record. And they hadn't even come up with the word gospel yet because, like I said, Thomas Dorsey was influenced by her. And so, they were just calling it, sacred music or whatever. But so that idea of, specifically combining the gospel and the blues, as Thomas Dorsey became known for, hadn't even happened yet. It was still in the works. But this is what I wrote about her. I said, I chose this song because in her music there is a nexus of piano styles which can later be found in jazz artists like Duke Ellington and gospel artists like Thomas Dorsey. So her style represents an early form of gospel jazz piano playing. Also, her use of blue notes in her singing is a sound which will later be found in both gospel singers, such as Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Roberta Martin, as well as jazz singers like Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald. So if you can, you would do well to check out this Arizona Drains. You can just go to YouTube and find it. It's all there. Then I went on to talk about, of course, people like Thomas Dorsey. You may or may not have heard of Mr. Sidney Bechet. He was a soprano saxophone player in New Orleans, and what was unique about that is, the usual instrument that was, the more traditional instrument in New Orleans, jazz was the clarinet. So, the most typical ones were the trumpet, clarinet, the trombone, and usually like maybe a banjo and a tuba. Later they would add a acoustic piano, a guitar, and drum set. But the original traditional sound was fulfilled by the clarinet. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Bechet played clarinet too, but he preferred the soprano sax. So he was one of the early soprano sax virtuosos of his day. And he had this song, it's called Chant in the Night. And when you listen to it, it really sounds like a spiritual. It's got this low baritone sax thing, and then he's up there in the sky. So you gotta listen to it, but if you listen to it, you can hear the sound of the spirituals influence it, because one of the things that I said in the book is that, if you were to slow that song down, you could actually hear, the traditional New Orleans dirge, which people would use as they're processing to celebrate, the life of someone that's homegoing. And, usually it's, really slow on the way to the graveside, and then once the ceremony is over, there's a parade, songs like When the Saints Go Marching In, and it's up, and so if you listen to that, check that out. It's Sidney Bechet, and it's a song called Chant in the Night. And then, of course, later I did mention Louis Armstrong, and he recorded When the Saints Go Marching In many, many times, and he was kind of like a symbol of New Orleans and the sound, particularly that bright, soulful, trumpet sound with a lot of vibrato and this very kind of in-your-face kind of sound. And he's saying the same way, and basically created a whole sound, or you're going to say pioneered a whole sound. There were a lot of people who did it, but he was one of the ones who became known for it. And so, as a song like When the Saints Go Marching In is a great example of gospel jazz, because on one hand, there's the message of, the eschatological message, if you will, of, the end times. The saints are going to go marching in, when the Lord comes again. And it's going to be a great time. The song says, what a day of rejoicing that will be. That's another song. But you can imagine that day of jubilation. But also, it's been a staple of many jazz ensembles. And so, even though the melody just goes, da, 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 oh, when the saints go marching in, you almost can't hear a jazz musician do it without going, da, 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 So it's become so stylized. So songs like those are, symbolic of this combination of the blending of gospel and jazz. Also, just fast forwarding a little bit, what's interesting is I have these songs juxtaposed against each other. Where is it? John Coltrane's A Love Supreme from 1965 and Ramsey Lewis's Wade in the Water from 1966 and Edwin Hawkins' Oh Happy Day from 1969. All of those were written around the same time, but you don't necessarily think of them as related. But the influence of bossa nova, which is a style that began in Brazil, had kind of come into vogue in the U.S. thanks to people like Stan Getz and some of the other Antonio Carlos Jobim, João Gilberto, those kinds of folks. Gilberto Gil, I think, was another one. Very well-known Brazilian musicians who kind of helped to pioneer this music, and a lot of jazz musicians picked up on it. So it's not by accident that song, the first movement in John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, which is called Acknowledgement, has a kind of almost like a bossa feel, right? And then Wade in the Water, same thing. Got that same kind of, and then Edwin Hawkins' Oh Happy Day. I actually got to meet him back in 2013 before he passed away, and he talked about how he listened to bossa nova, and that was kind of in his mind, because I would have never even thought of bossa nova when I listened to that song. But when you think about it's right there. Oh happy day, oh happy day. So it's when you look at these styles of music that are juxtaposed against each other. Once again, they're only about 4 years apart. Let me see. So Acknowledgement was 1965, right? Wade in the Water was 1966, a year later, and Oh Happy Day was 1969. So they're all right around that same time. So when you hear and I'm hoping that I will be able to allow you to hear those songs juxtaposed against each other, those little samples that I chose, you'll see it, or you'll be able to hear it and see it in the music, is what I meant, so that you can see how these things evolve together to get to what we have today. And then I'm gonna jump back a little bit. I'll bet you didn't know that even the great Charlie Parker played some gospel jazz. He had a song called The Hymn, which those of you that maybe follow me on Instagram or whatever, you may have seen. I've been working on the transcription of that solo, but it's a fast, Charlie Parker played everything, not everything, but he was such a virtuoso. He could play songs at ridiculously fast tempos, like effortlessly, but the song was fast, like right? And then, but the crazy thing is he started off with the solo, and then he went to the melody later. He and Miles Davis was playing trumpet with him, and that was back in 1947 that he did that. So when you listen to the song, you can hear the influence of hymns. Now that was just a short form. Most of the time there'll be like an extra 4 bars, but just if you listen to hymns and you listen to the progression of the harmony, you can hear how that there was the influence of hymns there too. And even though that's not what he was known for, growing up, as an African-American male in Kansas City, you better believe he heard some hymns growing up. And then on the other side, 1 year later, in 1948, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who was one of those, she was a guitar-playing gospel singer. She was known as one of the early progenitors of rock and roll. and you know, a lot of rock and roll singers imitated her or were influenced by her, and blues singers, you know, her guitar playing had a very signature kind of sound. But she recorded "Didn't It Rain" in 1948, just a year after Bird did the hymn. And so you can hear the influence of jazz in her playing as well. And so I listed her also in this medley. And then later, you know, there were people who were really delving into, you know, kind of a combination of the spiritual element, the protest for social justice, which also, of course, you know, people like Dr. King and other faith leaders, you know, were very influential on. One of my great heroes and mentors, Mr. Max Roach, with his then wife, Miss Abby Lincoln, did a song called "We Insist," and it was, let's see, it was in 1960 that they did that. And then there was another one they called it Triptych, which is like a three-tiered piece of art, prayer, protest, and peace. So I included some of their work in this sample. I don't know if you knew about Mr. Charles Mingus. He was a bass virtuoso, but he was also very well known for his compositions. Mr. Charles Mingus wrote a song. He wrote it in 1960, but this recording that I have was in 1976, Mingus at Antibes. The name of the song was Wednesday Night Prayer Meeting. So, you know, and of course, anybody who listens to Charles Mingus, you know you can hear the strong influence of the spirituals in his music. There's this one that he's really, that a lot of high school bands play. I can't even remember the name of it now, but it's that signature baritone sax, like da-dum-bum, ba-do-ba-da-do-do. And once the rest of the band comes in, you know, you can hear that kind of like the power of the sorrow songs, which, you know, had a strong influence on him. So, you know, as you trace this history, there is quite a bit of overlap. And although people may not have used the term gospel jazz per se, they were doing it. And, you know, what we do today, even though we've kind of coined that term, it's one of many, but the music has been around for a very long time. And there was another one that, you know, is probably many people have heard of, but Duke Ellington famously recorded a song from his Sacred Suite. It's called Come Sunday. And, you know, in that recording, there were several different ones, but one of the best known recordings was when he asked, you know, one of the most legendary gospel singers of all time, Miss Mahalia Jackson, to sing the lead. So here was Duke Ellington, you know, just one of the best names in jazz ever, you know, collaborating with Mahalia Jackson on a song called Come Sunday. And, you know, the song's Lord, dear Lord above, God Almighty, God of love, please look down and see my people through. So his intent was completely spiritual in that regard. He wanted to deliver a message. You know, it's not that he had to. He had written a whole bunch of quote-unquote secular songs that were very popular. But in this particular, you know, suite of songs, he wanted to specifically address the spiritual side of things. So, you know, there's a lot that like I said, there were 48 songs, and I added a couple more since then to make it so it's 50 now, songs that I talk about in the book. You know, so I hope that y'all will get a chance to check that out. Then there's a section where I talk about, oh, you have, excellent. There's a song that, a part of the book where I talk about the different names of it. And so I'm gonna just read a little section of that part. Some examples of other names that have been used are jazz spell, spiritual jazz, sacred jazz, gospel bop, or even hard bop to a certain extent. Jazz historians usually place hard bop squarely within the history of jazz, but acknowledge the influence of gospel on it. It has also been referred to as instrumental gospel because there's sometimes still a lingering stigma attached to the term jazz that causes church folk to shy away from a term like gospel jazz. Kirk Whalum has a series he created called The Gospel According to Jazz. Longtime DJ and saxophonist Tony Smith calls his show Gospel Jazzations. My album was called Jazz in the Spirit, which has also been used by others at various times. Then there are others who don't think of it as anything different, so they just call it jazz or gospel. I believe that Rick Germain at Gospel Jazz Radio of the Jazz Radio Network has done a great job of curating this music and drawing on a number of styles that I agree fall solidly within this genre. And then later on, I talk about some of the stylistic elements. For example, the most obvious are the presence of a gospel blues singing style, the use of jazz phrasing, articulation and harmony, swing, walking bass, and organization. It is a natural sounding fusion of the two. And then I go into a little more detail about Duke Ellington's Come Sunday and Take Sixes, If We Ever Needed the Lord Before. Now, you all may or may not remember that back in 1989, I believe it was, Take Six first kind of burst on the scene. And they were, I believe they're still the only group in history to have won a Grammy Award in jazz and gospel for the same album the same year. So in many ways, you could say that they were pioneers in the world of gospel jazz too. And then, of course, you have Pastor Ben Tankard, who has been, I think it was Dr. Bobby Jones first gave him the nickname, the Godfather of gospel jazz. And, you know, that's something that's just kind of stuck because, you know, as he said, and I have some quotes from him in the book, you know, that before he started using that term, he hadn't really heard people call it that. So it is, you know, it's very exciting to be able to delve deeply into this topic that's so near and dear to my heart. You know, I hope to, you know, to make this a book that can be used, as I said, in schools. This will by no means be the only. I hope there will be lots of other materials written on this topic because I believe it's very rich. But I also hope that this will be a book that just the general person will be interested in reading. Some of the parts may get a little thick and a little musicological, but and even ethnomusicological, because you know that's my thing. But I think it still will be a stimulating read. I've been inspired by books that I've been reading lately. There's a book by Thomas Dorsey's grandson, Thomas Dorsey III, and Dr. Alfonso Thompson called Living the Life I Sing About. That's, you know, taken from the title of one of his grandfather's songs that was made popular by Miss Mahalia Jackson. And in that, he chronicles some of the history of the music that his grandfather pioneered and how it has evolved, what it came from and how it evolved since then. There's also a book called The New Grove Dictionary. It's a book that's used in most music schools, but there's a section called Gospel, Blues, and Jazz, and they go pretty deeply into into the weeds of musicology about gospel, blues, and jazz, and there are articles on there that they've separated out as its own volume. I've been reading that. There's another book I've been reading lately called Jazz for Justice, and there's a bunch of different things that have been, influencing me as I've been reading, and definitely articles that I read on the internet. Now, research ones. I'm not just talking about people talking off the top of their head. I'm talking about stuff that's supported by, actual scholarship. Not trying to throw shade, but just you can't believe everything that you read on the internet. I'll just say it like that. You have to check it and cross-reference it. But, and don't believe everything that I say just because I say it. You can check it out, and if I'm wrong, just let me know and I'll fix it. But I try to read and research the things that I say pretty well, so that when I say them, I don't have to recant. I just want to share a little bit more, and then I'll go and give you all your Saturday back. One of the things when I was talking about the stylistic elements of gospel jazz is, check this out. I said, what makes it gospel is that it is about God. It sounds like gospel. It uses the same musical conventions. This is additive synthesis. No aspect of gospel is left out. No aspect of what makes jazz jazz is left out. Rather, it takes a special musician to be well-versed in both, to be able to execute both and to integrate them fluidly in a musical way. There are songs that can be called instrumental gospel, but not truly gospel jazz without the use of the jazz vocabulary in what Max Roach used to call the music of Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie. And it is similar to when jazz rock fusion became big in the 1970s. People like Miles Davis, the Brecker Brothers, Herbie Hancock, George Duke, that music bore elements of both jazz and rock. So, and if you listen to them, these are signature recordings that you can find. Just listen to some of those recordings to hear what some of these great masters created. So, so I'm excited. It's a lot of work, y'all. Writing a book is a lot of work, let me just tell you. But it's exciting because you know that I love history, and I talk a lot about legacy. I did one of my Saturday sentiments talking about legacy. I really feel it's important to leave this world better than you found it, and to leave something behind so that when you're no longer here, there's a part of you that lives on. Now, sometimes that can happen in the goodwill that you leave in your loved ones and so on. But if there is a way to create a certain permanence, the French call it raison d'être, a reason to be, if there's in spiritual terms they call it your calling. If there is something that is burning in your heart, is a reason why you're here, I believe that it's important to follow that, to pursue that vigorously, so that you can leave your legacy, you can leave your mark, and you can actually help to make this world better than it was when you found it by that contribution. So that's what I endeavor to do with my songs. That's what I endeavor to do with my writings. And hopefully this will be the first of more to come. Many of these Saturday Sentiments broadcasts I've done have kind of given me ideas that could turn into written work. So we'll see how that goes. But I just want to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to give you a little taste of the book. I'll just kind of close with this part. And I just said, I look forward to the day when we can have gospel jazz festivals all over the world, classes about gospel jazz, theory and composition, performance practice and technique, and of course history. More books written on the subject. Uh-oh, I just lost my thing here. Where did it go? Sorry, y'all, hold up. Is that it? Nope. Okay. Oh. Wait a minute. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I'm sorry. Let me find my page again. It's never happened before. Let's see if I can find that spot, because that was it was taken from the conclusion. Okay, there we go. I look forward to the day when we can have gospel jazz festivals all over the world. Classes about gospel jazz, theory and composition, performance practice and technique, and of course, history. More books written on the subject, scholarly books and books for the general public. Radio stations, cable and satellite music channels devoted to gospel jazz. A section in the store labeled gospel jazz. Venues that specialize in gospel jazz. Churches can do it and secular venues can do it. Supper clubs / brunches or full-blown restaurants. Gospel jazz open mic nights, jam sessions, musician sheds, master classes and instructional videos. Shelf space in libraries and bookstores. Concerts, booking agencies that specialize in it. Radio promoters that specialize in that. Social media influencers that drive attention and interest, movie specials and TV shows, Life and Times autobiographies, special editions in museums, archived materials, grants to fund further research, as well as commissions for compositions, features in award shows, Grammy, Stellar, Dove, allow students to major in it, write master's and doctoral papers about it. All of these things will help us to come together, because one of the great things about this style of music is that gospel jazz does truly bring people from different backgrounds together, as I've discovered over the many years I've been doing it. So I truly believe that if we are able to bring people together, to see each other and see what things they have in common, it will just help to spread love and make a difference in this world. So those are my thoughts so far. That's my little taste of my book on gospel jazz. And I'll keep you posted as it progresses. So hopefully, if all goes well, we'll make sure that we have something out there by Juneteenth of 2021. And I just thank you for sharing some of your morning with me. Again, if you enjoy what you heard, we certainly appreciate any kind of contributions that you can make. And we also hope that you continue to support the album, Jazz in the Spirit, and that you will like, follow, and subscribe, and click the notification bell on Facebook, on YouTube. It's Jazz in the Spirit video on YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitch, on Instagram. We're on all of those. And, just continue to listen and support this great music. Check out RichardDAbreuJr on Gospel Jazz Radio, the Jazz Radio Network, and, just do what you can to make a difference in this world. For those who'd like to join the mailing list, we have an email address called peoplewhomakeadifference@jazzinthespirit.com. So send us an email. We want to know what you're doing to make a difference in your corner of the world and in your sphere of influence. So may God continue to bless you, and I hope you have a great Saturday. You all take care of yourselves. All right now. Bye-bye. All right, folks. We'll see you later.